Eternal Strands is already the biggest game of 2025, because there are big enemies in it. You climb them, you stab them, pin them down with some ice. It's pretty cool, no pun intended. Not to brag, but I was the second person in the world to play this game. I had a preview session at Gamescom last year, and I could have been the first person had my Uber gotten me to my appointment on time. I was this close to being someone important. Bitterness aside, I enjoyed this demo, and Eternal Strands quickly became one of my most anticipated games of 2025. It's the debut title from Yellow Brick Games, a studio founded in 2020 filled with industry veterans in the AAA space. They were kind enough to provide me with a PC code for the game, where I finished the main quest and some side objectives in under 19 hours. So does Eternal Strands live up to its large ambitions, or does it crumble beneath them? Now, I promised during this review that I won't mention Shadow of the Colossus or Breath of the Wild at any point. If I do, you can punch me in the face. The game is set in a fantasy world, following a band of adventurers who find themselves in an abandoned and closed-off city called the Enclave. The player assumes the role of Bryn, a magic user called a Weaver, as she warps to various points across the Enclave to find out what happened to this place and how to get out. On her journey, she'll come across vicious beasts as well as machines called Arks that come in 3 different sizes: small, medium, and supersized. I'll admit, as excited as I was to jump into Eternal Strands, that excitement grew into concern during the repetitive opening hours. I fought a lot of the same enemies and kept breaking containers for resources that would fill up my small bag quickly, so I had to return to base camp to drop them off, rinse and repeat. It wasn't until the big creatures were introduced that things started to get a bit more interesting, although I still didn't understand some things. At first, I thought killing these monsters would give me strands to upgrade my magic, but I kept killing them with no reward. Instead, you have to expose a weak spot to harvest their strands before they die. There's already a quest to explain how to do this to one of the giant arcs, but not to the organic creatures, like an Ash Peak Drake or Brettig Glasstail. Frustrated, I perused the pause menu and found out what I needed to do. Read. Yep, there's a codex that teaches you how to expose the weak points of these creatures so you can harvest them effectively. This made my play sessions less stressful and the gameplay loop more satisfying. The best thing I can recommend for new players is to focus on the main quests for a while, as they'll help you get a hang of how the game works. And if you get lost, pressing up on the D-pad will give you a marker to help guide you to the next objective. I completely forgot it was there for a bit, so don't be like me. Focusing on the combat itself, you'll swap between a sword and shield, bow, and a heavy two-hander. But the real stars of the show are the 6 magic powers arranged in 3 categories: fire, ice, and kinetic. One of the key elements explained to me when I played the Gamescom demo was the importance of combining the powers, like generating an ice wall and using telekinesis to grab and throw parts of it, or trapping some objects on fire in a gravity field and then bursting it. I must not be that creative, because I didn't find much use in combining these powers. I found they were best used one at a time, like using Ice Wall to pin down bosses, and Ensnaring Blast to propel me up in the air. The world also reacts appropriately to each power, with flames engulfing vegetation and ice making the surrounding area cold. Because some enemies have environmental powers themselves, this can make for some chaotic battles. I also have to give credit where credit is due. This game runs on Unreal Engine 5, and I didn't find any stuttering whatsoever. Great job, Yellow Brick Games. You've done the impossible. I love you. Now let's get to these gigantic Ark bosses. It's clear they were influenced by Shadow of the Colossus, but they're still unique thanks to the multiple powers at your disposal. You can also fight them multiple times in different locations to harvest their threads. This goes for the giant animals as well. If you want to max out your powers, you'll have to take down these creatures 3 times, which may sound repetitious, but the battle can feel different if the monster is in a new location, or you come back with some new upgraded gear. While I've been bummed by having to repeat some boss fights thanks to a failed harvest, I never felt bored trying to take them down. I can't say I was amazed at the combat design though, because it felt rather simplistic. Just climbing on enemies and spamming the attack button until their limbs solidified, having me maneuver to the next one to repeat the same process. What keeps this pattern engaging are the smooth and responsive controls and the satisfaction of taking down that boss, gathering its fallen resources, and using them back at camp to forge new gear or reforge current weapons and armor. Reforging allows you to replace the materials used to craft those items in the first place with even stronger ones. This has made made easier by the menu showing you the best materials first. I often preferred reforging instead of simply upgrading because the change in stats would usually be more impactful. Of course, this is all done back at the base camp, where you use each of your party members' workstations to your advantage. I already talked about the forge ad nauseum, but there's also a station to weave magical strands, another to compile codex entries for lore purposes, and a supply cart to trade resources and salvage them to upgrade the workstations for additional benefits like stronger gear and more health vials. This makes gathering materials out in the world rewarding, which is why it would behoove you to fight tougher enemies instead of throwing them off cliffs along with their resources. Battling these smaller enemies feels fine thanks to the tight controls, but they're extremely basic in their looks and attack patterns. Although using magic could increase the excitement of these battles, it's ultimately faster to just spam attack and dodge until they're finished. As for the world itself, each segmented area is large, but I can't compare the exploration to something like Breath of the Wild, as it's not nearly as satisfying. You won't come across any mind-blowing revelations or secrets if you search every nook and cranny, but you will find some armor and weapon schematics like fire arrows and an ice sword. So exploration is still rewarding in that aspect. However, I think the best part of Eternal Strands is its story, specifically the impressive cast of characters. Though most of the cutscenes are still images with text boxes, the personalities of each character are conveyed with incredible voice acting that immerses you in the conversations.
I'm fine. Come on, say it with me. I deserve new shelves. No.
Each of them have side quests that are usually simple, like gathering a specific resource, but the stories told around these quests are well written and sometimes pack an emotional punch. One that left a huge impression on me involved helping an ally deal with compulsions brought on by intrusive thoughts. Moments like these made me appreciate each member of the band, and I felt a little guilty that I didn't complete all their side quests by the end. As for the story itself, it's not perfect, but it's an interesting one about the abandoned enclave and how it came to the state it's in. This leads to a classic conflict of good versus evil, but it all comes together well thanks to its focus on the characters. The writing team did a great job creating an extensive universe from scratch, which is an incredibly difficult task, and it leaves room for expansion in potential future installments. So my experience with Eternal Strands was kind of a roller coaster, with that repetitive opening and mechanics I didn't quite understand. But after going through that initial hurdle, I was eager to play this game to completion. While it's not perfect thanks to a lack of enemy variety and simple combat mechanics, I kept coming back to the game for its gameplay loop and story. Battling these giant foes was always engaging thanks to the magical abilities and responsive controls. It's very rewarding too, with the kinds of resources you'd get to upgrade your gear. It's more satisfying than simply leveling up skills with experience points. My biggest takeaway from Eternal Strands though is its character-focused narrative, making you feel like you're actually on a journey with these people, witnessing their struggles and accomplishments. Because of this, I have to give Eternal Strands a 7 out of 10. That's right, I'm doing review scores now. So that's my review of Eternal Strands. Now, if you want to try the game out for yourself, you have two options. You could download the demo on Steam or Epic Games Store to experience the prologue, or if you're an Xbox Game Pass subscriber, you'll be able to check this game out on that service when it releases tomorrow on January 28th. This goes for if you have PC Game Pass as well, and I highly recommend you all check it out if you have the means to. Plus, the game is going to be launching at $40, not even a fully priced $60 or $70. So are you going to check out Eternal Strands for yourself? Let me know down in the comments, and thank you once again to my beautiful members for supporting me and my channel. If you want to be a Ferris Wheel member yourself for early access to some uploads, click the link down in the description. But until next time, bye everyone.